It's Wednesday, March 9th, and you're watching CT Pulse on the HAN Network. I'm Kate Czaplinski with Josh Fisher.
Hey, Kate. Our guest this week is State Rep Jason Perillo, the Republican whip who represents the 113th General Assembly District right here in Shelton. He stopped by yesterday to talk with us about the state budget, the opiate crisis, politics, and a lot more.
Yeah, and of course, Josh, as always, we'll run down some of the stories we're following this week, including maxi pads and tampons considered luxury goods in the state of Connecticut. And we'll delve back into our discussion that we had last week on heroin and opioid addiction, looking at an interesting breakdown of who in Connecticut is actually dying from overdoses.
Yeah, and of course, Doug Smith, our editorial cartoonist, is going to join us to give you a preview of what's going to be in the HAN Network papers tomorrow and online, of course. But first, let's dive right into this interview we did with Jason Perillo, who stopped by yesterday afternoon.
Jason Perillo, the Republican whip who represents the 113th General Assembly District in Shelton. Jason, thanks so much for joining us this week.
Thanks, Kate. Josh, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's great to see you. So right now, let's get into this right away, Jason. The state budget right now is obviously the thing that's taking up most of your time in Hartford, for good or for bad. And you know, we saw about 6 years ago when Governor Malloy took office, he talked about the unions making concessions. That never really panned out. This time, is it more just kind of tough talk that we'll see disappear, or do you actually? We saw the Yukon Union withdraw their proposal for increases of 3.5%, then 4.5% the next few years. What is your take as the Republican whip of how the budget process is going this year?
Yeah, well, I think what you're seeing right now is the remnants of 6 years of tough talk that really never came to fruition. There was no follow through on that. We heard from the start of the governor's tenure, the road less traveled, shared sacrifice, and the thought process that some of that shared sacrifice would be borne by union employees, state employees, and to your point, that never really materialized. So here we are with deficits every single month. We get a higher deficit number, almost $300 million in this current fiscal year that ends in 3 months.
Right.
And then we're looking at $900 million plus next year, and it gets worse every month. So here we are up against the wall. Changes that we've suggested as a Republican caucus, both in the House and the Senate, changes we've suggested for 6 years have been ignored, and now all of a sudden everybody's hair is on fire because things are so bad and we need help from the unions, we need concessions from the unions. Well, if we'd been really thinking about this and taking this seriously for 6 years, it wouldn't be that bad. And it's interesting, you mentioned union contracts, and we were talking about it a little bit earlier. The legislature has the opportunity to approve or reject union contracts. And this legislature, led by Democrats, has not rejected a union contract since 1997. It's been 2 decades since a contract has been rejected. We just saw the legislature, at least the House side of the legislature, approve a tremendous increase to Yukon employees. Fortunately, that looks like it's going to change, but that would have been almost $100 million in a time when we don't have any money.
Right.
So how do you justify that? And the reality is you can't justify that.
So, and I've seen this, I remember it was, about 6 years ago or so, the Senate Republicans had proposed cutting just legislators' pay by 10% as a symbolic move, and that was, of course, rejected by the legislature. Well, we watched, so many people in this state either have their pay cut or lose their jobs, and a lot of people in the private sector haven't seen a raise in years. But if you work for the state of Connecticut, it seems like it doesn't matter. You could drive down the Merritt Parkway and there's signs missing, but you're still going to get a raise. When is Connecticut ever going to start actually looking forward and not just looking, 10 feet ahead? Well,
and the argument you always hear about state employees, and by the way, it's true, is that they work hard, so they get a raise. Nobody's suggesting that state employees are sitting around asleep on the job, because that's not the case. But you know what? Folks who work in the private sector, they work hard too, and they're not seeing those raises. In fact, in many cases, they're taking pay cuts just to make sure that employees don't get laid off, so they don't have to make those difficult decisions, so they can at least make sure that folks have enough to feed their families, put a roof over their heads. The rules are different in state government. And in fact, you even look at teachers' contracts, which always get beaten up. You see a lot of teachers' contracts where there are 0% increases because times are tough. and teachers recognize that, boards of education recognize that. But when you're a state employee with a state contract, that's entirely different. Everybody gets that bump every single year, still with very good health benefits, really outstanding pensions, defined benefit plans that, quite frankly, everybody in the public sector, in the private sector rather, has given up. And in fact, you'll see in a lot of towns, those pension plans are gone too, and you see towns moving to 401k.
Oh, yeah.
It's just not sustainable. It's just not sustainable. So, sure, we want to make sure that state employees have what they need and are compensated, but at what cost?
Right.
At what cost? When you've got folks out in the private sector who are seeing pay cuts, not seeing increases, and seeing layoffs.
Right. So, but what we see every year, this happens, every 2 years when the budget season happens. We talk about shared sacrifices and about how everyone needs to make cuts, but then you have individual factions popping up and say, well, yeah, we need to cut that, but this is important, whether it's rails, hospitals, education, roads, everything. So how do you, as a legislator, particularly someone in the minority, help move this process forward? What's the decision? Because obviously, in government, you can't make a 10% across the cut thing. You could talk about that, but that doesn't work in reality. You can't run government like a business, I think, no matter how hard people might campaign on that. Do you agree with that? But how do you move it forward?
Well, to your point, to simply say, take 5.5% or 10% across the board, it sounds good, and it is tough talk. And it's very simple to understand, but at the same time, you've got a lot of different programs. This is a complex system. There's a lot of stuff going on, and some folks might value one program over another. Hospitals are a great example.
Right.
Every time you take money away from hospitals, it has a direct impact on patients' access to care. And hospitals are one of those areas that are on the chopping block again. In fact, in current events right now.
Right, $140 million.
Big money.
Yes.
Big money. And that's not $140 million brand new money. This is 6 years of hospitals getting cut in the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars every single year. And there's a cost to that. And it's not simply a cost in terms of patients not having access to care, which is a true cost, but it's also a matter of patient safety too. We talk a lot about having enough nurses to make sure that a patient is treated properly and is treated safely and that there aren't errors. Well, hospitals have to make difficult decisions when they have less money to put towards patient care. And one of those decisions is cutting back on those staffing ratios and having fewer nurses for their patients. And what happens? The risk of mistakes goes up. So you can only cut so far until you get to bone, and hospitals are a great example of one of those areas that have really just been cut so deeply. We have to look at other things, and of course, public sector employees are one of those things that we have to look at. We just have to.
Right. As you mentioned, hospitals, and the governor's been getting a lot of criticism from both sides on that, and he's also calling for alternative plans. Are there any alternative cuts that you see as that you would support to kind of bring that money back to the hospitals?
Well, actually, healthcare is actually one of those areas. It's not really a blanket cut as the governor has done, but you look at fraud and abuse in the Medicaid system. It's there. It's to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, depending on which study you look at. But the state's never really, in my opinion, anyways, taken a hard look at that and really explored ways to claw back some of that money that shouldn't be going to doctors. And it's out there, and they need to do that because that money, quite frankly, can either be saved or shifted back into hospitals so they can make sure that patients are treated safely and effectively. We've talked about concessions from unions, and and nobody likes the L word, layoffs, but bearing the cost of the state employee workforce is significant, and quite frankly, that has been taken off the table. You can't get the legislature to oppose increases in state employee pay, so we can't just look at hospitals as the solution, and we can't just look at state employees as the solution, but you've got to look at them. You've got to look at all those other options. And again, we get into smaller social service programs, and you'll see the legislature cut a little bit here, cut a little bit there. Let's say $500,000. We're talking about $300 million in the next 3 months that needs to be found to bridge the gap. 50 grand here and there.
Right.
It's not going to cut.
Paper cuts, yeah.
Exactly.
So with all the focus by the media, by the legislators on the budget, it seems like it's hard to get other things done up in Hartford. Just, also, is that true? What gets lost with all this focus on the budget?
Well, you actually lose sight of those public policy issues that have an impact outside of dollars. Recently, actually, your studio's in Shelton, here in Shelton, we held a forum on heroin and the opioid crisis that exists, not just here in Fairfield County, New Haven County, but all across Connecticut and New England. Heroin abuse, abuse of painkillers is so rampant. This is not a new problem, but it is a problem that's really come to the surface in the last few years. And I think largely because, it used to be seen, folks who abuse drugs were troublemakers. Not going to happen in my neighborhood, not in my town, nobody I know. But all of a sudden, it's really come to the forefront that this isn't that guy you'll never see, or that girl you'll never see who in a back alley somewhere. This is your next door neighbor. This is your relative. This is your son, your daughter. And it's really starting to hit home with a lot of folks. And sometimes you need it to hit home for the issue to percolate up and get the legislature's attention. We're starting to see that. And it's an issue that doesn't just have a public health implication, it has a public safety implication. How are folks getting money to buy these drugs? These break-ins, home invasions, that's how folks are getting money to fuel their habit.
Right.
And until you can really tackle that, you're going to continue to see crime rise. You're going to continue to see these folks entering into our hospitals and emergency rooms. We have a huge access problem in terms of treatment for abuse and getting folks off of their need for these drugs. So that's one of those areas where you'd actually see some changes if the legislature is able to focus on it. And I believe that the desire and the will is there. You can actually affect some serious change, honestly, without really having an impact on the budget.
Now, there were some 200 people at that forum you were just talking about last
Very
week.
well attended.
So did you take anything new away from it, just kind of talking to people and hearing about the problem and what's going on?
Yeah, two things that were overwhelming to me. Almost everybody felt that there was not enough access to treatment. And I think that was heard largely by all the legislators who were there, the press who was there. Everybody understands that. So that was loud and clear. The other thing that was really interesting to me, kind of surprising but very refreshing, was how candid and willing folks were to talk about their own abuse issue, the abuse issues within their family. And it, like I said before, it just indicates how folks are finally ready to acknowledge that this is a problem, and they're willing to share their own personal experience in order to put some color on that, to make folks in the legislative community, in the government community, and throughout the community more aware.
We have really seen it, the families who have gone through, seeing a loved one with these addiction problems and don't want another family to go through the same problems. So what can the legislature do about this? Like, what's like a specific thing?
Well, there are specific drugs that can reverse the impacts. If someone were overdosing, there are drugs that can be administered. Narcan is exactly what I'm talking about. There are some others. So increasing access to Narcan, because we know at the end of the day, this is a disease. And part of getting folks through the disease is treating them in acute situations like an overdose. So if we increase access to Narcan, someone, quite frankly, who might have died, we give them another chance. We give them an opportunity to seek treatment, to get the help that they need, and make them productive and make them healthy, and restore their lives, restore the lives of their families. So that's one thing. There are many other options. In fact, it's such a huge issue. So many states are looking at this, and there's so many. Look at one study, look at another study. Health departments. There are a lot of different options as to how this can be dealt with, and again, in ways that don't necessarily impact the budget.
So there's some rather large pharmaceutical companies based here in Connecticut. Purdue Pharma down in Stamford is one which created OxyContin, or first released it out to the public and told people that it's not addictive. What sort of influence do the pharmaceutical companies have in Hartford that might make this difficult to change things?
The pharmaceutical companies are really no different than any other group that has an interest in legislation that's passed. They have a voice. The medical community has a voice. Victims and their families have a voice. So it's up to the legislature to then decide what's best. And you take that information from all these different interest groups. And as long as legislators need to listen to the insurance companies. They do. But they also need to listen to the victims. And you weigh that together and then decide what the best the best policy decision is based upon that.
Right. And we're hearing a lot about, as well, responsibility of not leaving unused medications behind, maybe having drop boxes in some of our communities if people have some of those, what could be highly addictive medicines. So, I mean, there's so many levels of it, and I think it's really great that it's finally, it's reached Hartford, and now it's become a big discussion point this year, which I think is good.
It really has.
And that's a good point, because we talked about the heroin epidemic last week on here, and we did hear back from some people about how, almost every single police department in this state, you can take in your unused medication and deliver it to them. Of course, you're not supposed to flush it down the toilet because it's bad for the environment, but then keep it out of the reach of children or visitors to your house.
Right.
Yeah, well, and that's just it. When folks who are addicted, they'll find a way to get it. They know, maybe it's their sister who has a prescription for it, and they visit for Easter, and all of a sudden, drugs disappear.
Right.
When you're hooked and when you need it, you find a way to get it. So, drop boxes are a great example of a policy change that has actually worked. It's taken a lot of narcotics.
Walter Stewart's Market in New Canaan is your time-saving local shopping destination for the best of spring. Find many of your favorite products, from great specials on everyday items to the freshest organic produce, artisanal cheeses, and grass-fed steaks. Drop off your knives to be sharpened, grab a beautiful bouquet of spring flowers, and stop in next door for a wine tasting. Plus, their personable staff is always ready to lend a helping hand. So stop in to Walter Stewart's Market, 229 Elm Street today, or shop online at stewartsmarket.com.
Had a sports injury that needs immediate care? Coastal Ortho Express Urgent Care gives you direct access to an orthopedic specialist quickly. Their highly trained orthopedic professionals expertly treat you without an appointment. Skiing, snowboard, or sports accident, sprain or fracture, Coastal Ortho Express can help. Coastal Ortho Express Urgent Care open Monday through Saturday in the iPark building at 761 Main Avenue in Norwalk. Call 203-845-2070 or coastalorthoexpress.com. Find them on Facebook at Coastal Ortho CT.
Darien Sport Shop is a unique store because it's a family store. A busy mom can come in with kids in tow and find everything she needs for them, and even find a dress for herself for Saturday night. And if she's in a rush, she can simply go home and order it from us that night. We'll deliver it the next day. The Darien Sport Shop. We're pretty on the outside and amazing on the inside. Conveniently located with free and easy parking at 1127 Post Road, Darien, Connecticut. Or shop us online at dariensport.com.
Hi, I'm Rob Adams with my good friend Donald Eng, and we're the home team for Nutmeg Sports, Monday through Wednesday at 2 o'clock right here on the HAN Network. We are the place for all things Connecticut sports, so come hang out with us on Nutmeg Sports. Don? They don't call him the best color man in the game for nothing. Nutmeg Sports, 2 o'clock, Monday through Wednesday right here on the HAN Network.
You are watching the HAN Network, and you're not alone. Nearly 500,000 viewers enjoyed our broadcasts in the first 5 months. Advertise on the network that reaches Fairfield County, Connecticut's most engaged audience. Contact Jessica Murrin, Advertising Director, at 203-273-7312 or email jessica@han.network.
Welcome back to CT Pulse on the HAN Network. We're live right now in Shelton on Wednesday, March 9th, along with Kate Czaplinski. I'm Josh Fisher. We're going to get back to more of that interview we did with Republican Whip Jason Perillo that we recorded yesterday. But right now we want to take a look at some of the stories that we've been following this week. And one, Kate, this is a surprise.
Yes.
I know in the newsroom we talked about this a lot this week. Why don't you fill us in on this luxury tax that apparently you've been paying?
Apparently I am paying a luxury tax. I didn't even realize it, because when you have to buy stuff, you just have to buy and you don't think about it. But there are more than 120 items exempted from sales tax in Connecticut, and State Representative Kelly Luxembourg of Manchester is working to add feminine hygiene products and disposable and reusable diapers to that list. It may shock you to hear that sanitary pads and tampons are currently deemed luxury goods and are not exempt from sales tax, as they are in only 5 states: Maryland, Massachusetts, Minnesota, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. Now, this is from a story on the New Haven Register. That photo you just saw was from Christine Stewart of CT News Junkie. They've done a really good job covering this story. And the shocking thing is that this has come up in the past to take tampons and maxi pads and diapers off of this list, and it's failed in the past. And as they,
How old, we know how old this law is? Is it like one of those weird Connecticut laws, like you're not allowed to kiss your wife on Sunday. And
I mean, well, listen, tampons haven't been around forever, so you have to imagine it's not that
well, so when they
old.
first came out, they were quite a luxury, I'm sure.
Right, quite a luxury. Let me tell you, there's
Just like
nothing
diapers.
luxurious about it. And it's just, it's interesting because, again, as one of the speakers pointed out at this hearing in Hartford, getting one's period is a biological function, not a choice. It is worth questioning why a uniquely women's product is taxed. And
maybe
some
because
people,
it's a bunch of old white men who make the laws?
But some people obviously consider it a form of gender
territory.
discrimination that is laughable, and I would say I have to agree with that. But there is some support this time around to take this off of that list of luxury goods.
Now, in a state right now that is facing a budget crisis, as we talked with Jason Perillo about earlier, what do you think? You can see the argument made. Listen, you guys are right. This is not a good thing to be taxed, but you know what? We could really use that $3.6 million.
Well, let's talk about that photo that we had up, as I said, was from Christine Stewart from CT News Junkie. The speaker in that is holding a maxi pad and an incontinence pad. One is taxed and the other isn't. And as you can see, they're basically the same thing.
Well, one is used by old white men who make laws,
but
one
women,
is not.
Older women as well, or women who've had lots of children.
But old men don't use maxi pads.
No, I understand that. So yes, adult diapers are not on that list. So it is kind of insane,
So
somewhat
it depends
outrageous.
on which side of the thing you're on right now.
Yes. So, as I said, it's just something that caught my attention this week because
certainly.
I was unaware that I was actually paying a tax on
would you
that.
consider driving across state lines, maybe going over to Port Chester or something in New York to get?
No.
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 All right, it's not worth it.
But they bring up a good point. Women that are struggling, who also have to buy diapers, because that is also on the list, may try to make those items last longer, which leads to obviously a lot of health concerns. In reality, you don't want to have to stretch that thing out. You should be able to buy, obviously, as much as you need. It is not a luxury item. So let's get rid of that, Hartford. Just saying.
So we got to find something else to tax.
Yes.
Okay.
Something maybe that you buy, but like we said, we can't think of one item that's similar that only men have to buy.
Yeah, if you have an idea, you could, tweet us,
Let us know.
HAN Network CT, find us on Facebook, when we post this show later today, and let us know.
Yeah, I can't think of one thing.
Something to make this even, so that to save the state of Connecticut, I'm still, Connecticut needs its tax money. So, but let's, rather than take away this tax, let's add a tax to the men.
To the men, all right, let's think about that.
So, I don't know what it is. Maybe could add extra tax to Viagra or something like that.
Okay, sure, but that could also harm women in some ways.
It's true. Too much Viagra could definitely harm women.
All right. Anyway, let's talk about another story. This is an interesting one that you found,
It is.
Josh.
So up in Guilford, up the coast, there's a movement by the students there to ban the R word. Retarded is the word that they're talking about.
At Guilford High School.
At Guilford High School, yes. So the students have been passing around petitions and talking about how awful that word is, and certainly things have changed. That word, which was a common medical term for people who are mentally disabled, then grew into, I know certainly for most kids it was an insult that was shared on the playground. What do you think about that?
So I have to say, I hate that word, and whenever people say it, I do say, I try to talk to them about why they shouldn't. However, we don't ban words. And I think that obviously what we've seen, especially on college campuses and high school campuses, is maybe going a little bit overboard, too far with some of these movements, and you're actually impinging on other people's constitutional rights by, we've seen some of that happening.
Yes.
And freedom of speech and all those good things. So no, I don't think we should ban it. But what do you think?
I agree. I think it's where does it end? And of course this wouldn't be a law, but I think through education and through maybe the politely shaming people for using the wrong words. But then what are the other words? And are we going to ban the word gay? Because that's also an insult that people used to use more than they use now. And where does it end? Where does it end?
I think it's good they're talking about it, but as we said, the idea of banning it, I just don't like that term.
It was like Chris Powell.
We don't ban words or books or anything like that.
Right. Chris Powell, the managing editor of the Journal-Inquirer up in Manchester, had a column a few years ago, or about a year ago, about this, because he got into some hot water for using the word retarded, but how it was originally meant as a medical term. And so he talked about, well, what are the kids saying on the playgrounds now? Are they calling, oh, you're so special needs? And it is that slippery slope. Eventually a word that we have today that is not an insult could be an insult 10 years from now. And it just, the language is always evolving. So.
And now finally, Josh, you found an interesting story from the Connecticut Mirror written by Jake Kara, former staffer here at HAN, talking more about the opioid overdose crisis, which we've been talking about, especially last week with the doctor from Silver Hill. But tell us about this story.
Well, what's interesting is, we talked about this and how, there's been an opiate crisis going on in this country for a long time. But it kind of seems like, well, is it being covered now by the media because it's white people who are dying? So Jake did this interesting numbers stories, which is something he's very talented with the stats. It's nice to see him thriving over there at the CT Mirror after leaving us here. You can see right here that it is white people, 1.77 deaths per 10,000 white people. There are more white people dying than what is the average across the whole state. And if you move on to the widening gap, the second chart we have there, you can see that non-white deaths from opiates have started to go down a little bit. And we're just kind of covering up the years there with the lower third graphic there, but you can see this started in 2012, these stats, and go through 2015. And then even more so, the rate of change here in 2012, Black, Hispanic, and white residents were affected by accidental opiate overdoses at a similar rate as all residents, but that death rate has increased not only for whites but for Hispanics as well, but for blacks, which was higher than any other race in 2012, that has started to go down. That is the accidental overdose. And then also the age group is interesting. Of course, a lot of attention is paid to, particularly in our community newspapers and websites, when a teenager overdoses on heroin or some other form of opiate. Right. But we really see that it is particularly the middle-aged folks, 30 to 59. Right. Who are getting it, but still you see the green there are white people, and that takes up a big chunk. Hispanic is the big chunk in the 40 to 49 age.
Wow. And it's, I have to say, when you look at the 20 to 29 range, what we've been seeing recently in a lot of our news stories around HAN is the 20-year-olds, young white males in their 20s who have been overdosing, some who have been able to be saved by Narcan. But speaking of that addiction, and as we talked about with Jason Perillo, there was a forum in Shelton last week, and Shelton Herald editor Aaron Berkowitz was there, and he captured some interesting video of a speaker who was formerly addicted. Check that out right now. Really interesting points that he makes there.
Substance abuse counselor for the past 16 years. I want to thank the state of Connecticut for saving my life at Griffin Hospital, the EMS team, because if they didn't, I wouldn't be here. There is hope. I know it's difficult. I work with trying to get people in treatment every day of my life, and it's tough. We need more beds. We need recovery houses. We need beds. We need sober houses. We need treatment. We need longer treatment. I got married. I have a son. I have a good life. But the terrible life I suffered chasing heroin, I didn't choose to be a heroin addict. It happened. I was in a motorcycle accident. I got addicted to pain meds at Bridgemoor Hospital. And from there, I lived 3 blocks from Father Panic Village, and I learned how to buy drugs. And I bought them, and it ruined my life, and I went to prison 3 times, and the state of Connecticut saved me. Thank God. But there's hope. Don't give up. Don't give up. Keep calling, keep reaching out. Thank you.
Sir, thank you.
And again, you could get more information on that forum at sheltonherald.com. But right now, Josh, we're going to roll into the second part of the interview that we did with State Representative Jason Perillo. We asked him some local politics questions, some presidential politics. Check it out.
True. That's true.
Well, kind of switching gears right now, Jason, you've been very involved in local politics and in state politics. And I know recently there was an interesting story about you kind of purchasing some websites. Can you tell us a little bit about that, or what the thinking was? I mean, we've talked about it on this show a bit.
Yeah, I saw some of the comments you folks had on it. I appreciated those.
We think it's brilliant.
Well, there are 2 different types of people who purchase websites. There's a guy like me who just finds it interesting. Somebody might run for office, so I'm going to gain access to that site. And then there's guys, quite frankly, like the Donald Trumps of the world. They buy your name, and all of a sudden, you click on,
like what he did with JebBush.com.
Fisher.com, and all of a sudden you click on it, and it goes to Kate Czaplinski's website.
Right.
Just to make life difficult for folks. To make life difficult, and that's
Well, Kate's good at doing that.
That's really not right. I mean, you know, it's just not the way you're supposed to treat people. Somebody's name is important to them, and you don't do things like that. That's just that's inappropriate. And actually, you talk about things like cyberbullying. I mean, you can really do some damage to something. A high school student, if you were to take their name and direct it to an inappropriate site. I mean,
it could be very serious.
It could be very serious.
But so you're doing it more as someone who's interested in campaigns and in politics and kind of for fun. I mean, I didn't
But
see a
then,
big part with
no,
it.
I mean, I thought it was funny. I thought it was great. But like, what was your plan? What's your plan if, say, George Jepsen? I know you bought JepsenForGovernor.com. So if George Jepsen, the Attorney General here in the state, decides to run for governor, what would you do with that website?
You know, I called the Attorney General after that story came out, and he and I had a great conversation. And you know, it was funny. He called me back, and I answered the phone, and he said, "Yeah, this is George Jepsen for governor." So we laughed, and you know, what would I have done? I would have given him the website. He's a very good guy. You know, these are folks who are my friends. Nobody wants anybody to get hurt.
Right.
Fair
So
enough.
you didn't buy a website for Tim Herbst?
No,
No.
I did not.
Because
I did
he's
not.
one of the persons that people are expecting to run, for governor.
Well, I know you and
this
Tim
year
are
in 2
tight.
years. Yeah, occasionally he responds to my tweets.
Yeah.
That's about as tight as we get.
Well, and let's look at Tim Herbst. I mean, as the first selectman of Trumbull, he performed really well in the last election.
Oh, he did.
In
He did.
2014, he really, truly
Got
did.
the
So
most votes of any Republican on the
Absolutely.
statewide
So
ballot.
He's a great campaigner. He really is a strong campaigner.
He works awfully hard.
Yes,
he
he
really
does.
and truly does.
Yeah. He does.
So any list of folks who might be
Right.
interested in running for governor in 2018, his name's got to be on.
Who else do you think would be on that list?
Well, Mayor Bowden.
Besides Tom Foley, of course.
Well,
Third time's a charm,
Tom, who was a
Tom.
wonderful guy, has
Yeah,
had a
no, I
couple
like
shots
Tom.
at it. I would
Not a
doubt that
good
he's interested
campaigner,
anymore. Mark Boughton, who's been
Right.
interested a couple of times, is a fantastic guy. He would make a great governor. We're here in Shelton. Mayor Loretti has talked about running
Right.
for governor. I've worked with the mayor for a long time. He runs a fantastic city. I mean, if you want low taxes, there's really no place better than Shelton. He's been very, very effective. There's always talk about perhaps John McKinney making another run. John is a great guy. He's very, very talented, very intelligent. So, when you look at the Republican Party in terms of who we have who might be interested in running for governor in a few years, it really is a talented group of individuals. It really is.
And there's been a lot of talk that if Hillary Clinton's elected president, that she might take Governor Malloy with her down to Washington in a cabinet position or something else, which would make the Lieutenant Governor, Nancy Wyman, become governor. Be 2 lieutenant governors in a row who became governor. What would, I mean, I don't know if she would run for re-election.
I don't know.
But that would certainly open things up.
It would definitely change
for
the
the
dynamic.
Republican Party.
Definitely change the dynamic.
Malloy's built up a pretty decent machine, whether you agree with him or not, for getting the vote out and getting elected. And speaking of the presidential election, there's been some talk now about in the state about what Connecticut Republicans would do with a Trump atop the ticket this fall. Who are you supporting? Are you going to, Connecticut vote could matter come April.
Well, usually Connecticut doesn't matter
Of
at all,
course,
but here we are,
Right.
mid-April.
Yeah.
Who knows what the landscape's going to look like? If Senator Rubio and Governor Kasich can make it through their states and win their states, they're still in it. I mean, if Senator Rubio goes to Florida and doesn't win Florida, it's going to be a little bit tough for him.
Right.
I've seen Governor Kasich speak a number of times. He does a great job. He's excellent. I'm a fan of Governor Kasich.
Yeah, I am too. Why isn't he? I mean, it's amazing. It's like, why isn't Kasich, who has the most experience and is, has been a chief elected official, he's been a congressman, he's been in the private sector, he speaks reasonably and he's nice, and he's
Not
doing
entertaining
terribly.
enough, apparently.
Well,
That's what Bill O'Reilly told him, is he's not exciting.
Like I said, the few times I've seen him in person, he was really excellent. And he had the room, he had them. They were very, very interested. That hasn't necessarily translated well to television. He is a hard campaigner, I know that. I know a lot of the folks who at least in New Hampshire, worked with him. Why he's not gaining traction, I don't know. But now you see polls coming out in Michigan that he could be in the hunt there. So
Right, yes. And of course, we're recording this on Tuesday, which is Michigan. The people in Michigan are voting right now, and by the time we air this tomorrow, we'll be able to do an update about who won Michigan. I'm sure people will know.
I would imagine.
I don't
By the time you
think-
hear this, somebody's going to know.
So that would be very interesting. So who's the best candidate atop the ticket, and who's the worst candidate atop the ticket for the Connecticut Republican Party? this
For
fall?
the Connecticut Republican Party?
Yeah. Who's going to help you win some more seats in the House? In the past few elections, the state reps in the Republicans have been picking up seats in the House.
Yeah, we've got 64 seats in the House. It's
10
the
years
most,
ago, there was a
we've had.
super majority.
Right.
And now, so who helps you the best?
I don't know the answer to that. I think the person who helps us the least is Ted Cruz.
Yeah.
He's extremely conservative, as we know.
Yeah.
And I don't think that necessarily translates well to more moderate voters in
Right.
Connecticut. Say what you want about Donald Trump, but he's got people excited.
Yeah.
Right.
Ted Cruz doesn't seem to excite here in Connecticut.
No.
I mean, I know a lot of folks.
Yeah.
You wouldn't necessarily expect Trump to be popular here in Connecticut, but I know a lot of folks.
I
who
do.
are.
I know. You
Yeah.
see it more and more. It's
Folks you
really
wouldn't expect
interesting.
it from.
Yeah.
Right. No, yeah, it's bringing out different people into the fold, which could end up work out well for the Republican. People generally who don't normally vote, particularly in the midterm elections,
Right.
who vote for president tend to vote for that party all the way down. Of course, Senator Blumenthal's on the up for re-election this year, and could be an interesting year. I mean, he'll probably get re-elected.
Senator Blumenthal has been a fixture in Connecticut politics for decades. He's tireless. He's everywhere.
Yeah.
He's everywhere. So give the guy credit.
No,
Oh, yeah,
that's true.
Definitely.
That's true.
And I got to say, Jason, you are really amazing. You're always in touch with your constituents. I used to cover you in Shelton, and so we really appreciate the work you do and coming to talk with us today.
Thanks. I love Shelton. I live it and sleep it and breathe it. And
Hometown
it's
boy,
fantastic.
right?
Yeah, all the way. All the way.
All right.
Well, thanks for
thank
coming
you
by
so
today.
much.
Thank you both.
Thanks a lot, Jason.
All right. Well, we'll be back with more CT Pulse after this.
For more than 50 years, Triple S has been Fairfield County's expert service for carpet, upholstery, and drapery cleaning. We provide the best in repairs and in-depth restoration, understanding fabrics and how to properly clean and restore them. Our staff will come to your home to clean your wall-to-wall carpet to perfection. We can also pick up your fine carpets and bring them to our facilities. With locations in Norwalk, Stamford, and Stratford, Triple S will get the job done fast, big or small. At Triple S, you can count on our people as well as our cleaning. Find us at triplesclean.com or 203-847-8000.
For over 25 years, Mike Cizik Painting and Wallpapering has been the name to know for residential and commercial properties in Fairfield County. He uses only the top brands, including Benjamin Moore, for impeccable preparation and lasting quality. Call Mike now and receive $500 off any job over $7,000. Mike is currently accepting reservations for spring, so call him today at 203-770-8869 or 203-972-3310. For your custom painting, finishing, and staining needs, it's Mike Cizik.
I'm Kate Czaplinski. Join us for Coffee Break, weekdays at 11 to get the latest Connecticut news, weather, high school sports, and more. News doesn't get any more local than on Coffee Break on the HAN Network.
When it comes to local entertainment, we've got it all.
From movies, local artists, etiquette, and more.
Watch HAN Arts and Leisure every Thursday at 2 on the HAN Network.
And we're back on this Wednesday, March 9th, CT Pulse on the HAN Network. I'm Kate Czaplinski with Josh Fisher, and it is the time in our show to start drawing conclusions with Doug Smith. He is defacing artwork this week. But it looks so good. All right, you made it look better. I like the mustache. All right, Doug.
Could have made her frown, though.
I know. But everywhere I went, it looks like she was following me.
All right, Doug, so let's launch into your cartoons this week. What do we have up first? Norotan Yacht Club liquor license.
The yacht club in Darien, they wanted to have a liquor license, and the neighbors were up in arms about it, which I found kind of humorous because when would a bunch of wasps turn down the martinis? But,
exactly.
It's like they want to control who has the martinis.
Right. So they're bombing their cask right there.
Weird. Someone in Darien doesn't like what their neighbor's doing.
Now I noticed you had a lot of these week.
Yeah, this is the Saddle Ridge development in Easton, and it's been going on for a couple years now. And it always goes back to the 830G thing, where they override the local zoning laws to
the
get their
affordable
thing.
housing law.
Exactly, they have 10% allocated for affordable housing, so that overrides any zoning things.
Right, and people are not happy about it and
Right.
potential, environmental impacts.
Now,
as
what
you
happened
show
though
there.
is it's been going on about the watershed. It could be damaging to it. So the judge ruled in their favor, saying like, despite 830G, it's a danger to the water supply, which supplies a bunch of towns in the area. And in light of what's happening in Michigan there, it's a
Right.
touchy subject.
Yeah, definitely. And another one, I like this one. Saddle Ridge is the Godzilla.
Right, this is going back to 2009. This is when they first proposed
Jeez, it's
the
been
thing.
going on a long time,
It
yeah.
has.
So it's shrunk down, though. It was Godzilla, now it's just
Right.
a guy with the hairy back.
That's when they had the 830G on their side.
So
Now,
this one, yeah.
This is one of the first times they brought up the water concerns.
I'm not sure if even you can hurdle that. I love this one too. Easton is the horse trying to get away from Saddle
And
Ridge.
I just kind of wanted to echo their sentiments like, look, we just don't want it. What don't you get?
Right.
And that's another thing with the 830G, like jumping over the zoning there.
I like that.
I like that one too. Oh, I love this one. It's just so silly. Bobcats have been spotted on Route, is it 33? I can't see the
35.
35.
In Lewisboro.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Driving this little convertible. So
Got his
cute.
nice Mercedes there.
And a little bulk pickup joke here.
Yep.
It's not Hulk pickup, everyone. What town was that for?
That is, who is that? That's Trumbull.
Trumbull, right. Tell
It's
us
a
about
silliness.
this one. Silliness.
Monroe Trumbull Toastmasters. Some kid envisioning it's just a giant thing of toast.
Yeah. And John Adams will make an appearance at the Milford Public Library. I love this one. On Thursday, March 17th, Sam Adams will be making many appearances
Just an early
in
St.
here.
Patrick's Day.
Well
thing.
done.
A little St. Patrick's Day humor, which we always appreciate,
nice
coming up
New
quicker
England
than you
humor,
think.
too.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I love this one. Now, this is about the MTA not paying some fees.
To the New Canaan Police Department.
Right,
which
owing
they
them a
hired
significant
to
amount of money.
Whatever, either guard or maintain traffic, and they've racked up a lot of overtime with the police force, and the police can't really ask for the money from them. They have to go to the town to ask for it, and the town sent them a bill, and they just keep ignoring
So
it.
the MTA is crawling out the window.
Right.
And what's interesting about that is a couple years ago in New Canaan, it was discovered that the town had actually forgot to send out bills for about $750,000 to places like AT&T and the MTA and other things. So New Canaan has a kind of a poor history of collecting that money for the
Well, I
police.
just drew from my own sordid past of growing up in Wilton, and we had the Friendlies downtown, and that used to be a common thing we do, bolting out the bathroom
Dine and
window.
dash?
Yeah, exactly.
Nice, nice.
Until they welded it shut.
Hey, Doug.
Get that Sunday for free and then run out of there. Now tell us about this. This is the search for a superintendent in
Right.
Weston.
Weston.
Oh,
And
that's cute.
That actually is a repeat of a cartoon that was done for Darien a few years ago. You remember with the special ed
Yes.
fiasco?
Yes, I do
And
remember
I think
that.
the superintendent just finally ran screaming out of there like, don't want any more, and
Right.
they were looking for a new one. So I just modified that one a little bit.
Yeah, and it's perfect. You could use it again. I love it. And tell us about this one. Is this based on a column?
This is
or?
the etiquette column. She's talking about, or somebody's talking about the person on the other
Looks
side of
just
the
like
cubicle.
Don Eng.
The first thing that popped into my mind is it looks like Don Egg's cubicle.
But he's complaining about the way he eats food and makes a mess and puts his feet up and just disturbs him. So I,
Throws a, bone on the ground.
Don Egg used to have it was like this high stack of salad dressing containers.
oh boy. And we got those questionable stains there. I don't even want to think about what they are on the floor. But.
I think we have one more.
Oh, Joe Pisani's column. And he was just mentioning that this seasonal Lent, to him, since he's not eating meat, he talks about he looks forward to having fish and chips.
Fish fry.
yes.
I like it. It's a
And
little
this-
cannibalistic there, though, for that fish,
just
huh?
His cholesterol level and all
Better
that.
them than him, right?
All right, Doug. Well, thanks as always so much for
Okay, thank
joining
you.
us this week. We love it. Josh,
Kate?
we're going to wrap up this week's CT Polls.
Yeah, that's it.
You could find us on demand later if you missed anything at han.network. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Fight the tampon tax increase.